My wife is anonymously funding her ex-husband's entire lifestyle through our shared business. It started, like most things do, with something so small you almost miss it. A smudge of dried mud on the driver's side floor mat of my car, a car she rarely drove. I chalked it up to her being tired, distracted. We were building something, this business. It consumed us. Nights blurred into days, weekends were for spreadsheets and inventory. We'd met in that chaotic startup phase, both of us with more ambition than sense, fueled by cheap coffee and the intoxicating belief that we were going to change the world, or at least our little corner of it. Turns out, that belief, that shared dream, was as fragile as a house of cards. The initial spark, the late-night brainstorming sessions that bled into shared laughter and whispered promises, had morphed into a different kind of intensity. We were good at it, damn good. Our online boutique, selling curated vintage finds, had exploded, from a tiny apartment crammed with boxes to a warehouse downtown. It was supposed to be our testament, our proof that we could do anything we set our minds to. And you know what? If you're digging this kind of raw, honest story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And hey, if this resonates with you, or even if it just makes you think, give it a like, share it with a friend, and drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your feedback means the world. Anyway, back to the mud. It was the kind of rich, dark loam you find out in the country, the kind that clings, not the gritty city stuff. I remember thinking, maybe she went for a walk somewhere green? But it was November. Everything was brown and gray. And then there was the credit card statement. A small charge at a local artisanal coffee shop, one of those places with exposed brick and baristas who judge your order. Again, not a big deal. She liked her fancy lattes. But it was the date. It was a Tuesday. I'd been at the warehouse until midnight. She'd supposedly gone home early with a headache. The coffee shop was on the other side of town, nowhere near our house. Little things. They accumulate, like dust bunnies under the sofa. You don't notice them until you move the furniture. Her name is Sarah. We've been together for 8 years, married for 5. We built this business from the ground up. Every dollar, every late night, every sacrifice, it was all supposed to be for us, for our future, for the dream. She was my rock, my partner in crime, the one who kept me grounded when I got too excited about a ridiculously priced antique lamp. She had this way of looking at me like she saw the best in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. That's what made it all so unbelievable. The thought that she would betray that, it felt like a betrayal of the air I breathed. The ex-husband, his name is Mark. He was the one before me, the one who broke her heart, or so the story went. He was a musician, transient, unreliable, classic artist type. He'd apparently cheated on her, left her a mess. She'd sworn off him, swore she'd never look back, and I believed her. I saw how she flinched when his name came up in conversation, how her jaw would tighten. I was the steady guy, the reliable one, the one who bought her flowers for no reason, who remembered her coffee order, who built a life with her. I was the antidote to Mark, or so I thought. The suspicion started as a whisper, a tiny doubt that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. It was the late nights at the office. She'd say she was catching up on emails, on order fulfillment. But sometimes I'd get back to the house and the lights would still be on in her study, but she wouldn't be there, and her car would be in the driveway. Odd. She was meticulous about locking up the warehouse, always the last one out, double-checking everything. But these late nights at home with her car there, it didn't add up. Then came the money. Our business was doing well, more than well. It was thriving, but our personal finances were tight. We reinvested everything. Every profit, every penny went back into the business. New inventory, better marketing, expanding the warehouse space. That was the agreement. That was the plan. We lived modestly. Our house was nice, sure, but not extravagant. We drove decent cars, but nothing flashy. We talked about future plans, a vacation house upstate, a proper retirement fund, the kind of stuff you work for. But Sarah started dressing a little better. Not drastically, just subtle upgrades. A cashmere sweater here, a designer handbag she'd never used before. She attributed it to sales bonuses, to smarter spending. I bought it. I wanted to buy it. The alternative was too ugly. And then there were the dinners out. She'd go with friends, she'd say, or with her sister. But sometimes she'd come home smelling faintly of expensive perfume, a scent I didn't recognize, and her phone would be on silent, always. One evening, I was looking for an old invoice in her study. Her laptop was open. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally. I just needed a file. And her browser was still open, a banking website.
I saw the account name. It wasn't ours. It was an individual account, and the balance, it was substantial. More than substantial. It was more money than I'd seen in our joint business account in months. My stomach clenched. I told myself it was a mistake. Maybe it was an old account. Maybe it was for something personal she hadn't told me about. But the date on the transactions, they were recent, very recent. I started paying closer attention, not in an obsessive way, at least I didn't think so. More like noticing the discrepancies. The way she'd get a text, her face would fall, then she'd plaster on a smile and turn away. The hushed phone calls she took in the other room, her voice low and urgent. The time she'd be out, and I'd try to reach her, and she wouldn't answer, not for hours. The real blow came with the car. We have 2 cars, mine and hers, both registered under our names, both insured by our household policy. Then, a few weeks ago, a parking ticket arrived in the mail for Sarah's car, but the address it was sent to, it wasn't our house. It was an apartment complex across town, an address I didn't recognize. I thought maybe she'd lend her car to a friend, that the friend had forgotten to tell her about the ticket. So I called her. She was cagey, said it must have been a mistake. The next day, out of sheer gnawing curiosity, I drove past the apartment complex. It was a decent place, not luxury, but not a dump either. And there, parked in one of the designated visitor spots, was Sarah's car, her vintage Volkswagen Beetle, the one she adored. My blood ran cold. Why was her car there, and why wasn't she with it? I waited for almost an hour, and then he walked out. Mark, her ex-husband. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive watch and carrying a bag from a high-end electronics store. He unlocked the passenger side door, got in, and drove away, in Sarah's car. I felt like the world had tilted on its axis. The solid ground beneath my feet had turned to quicksand. This wasn't just about a few suspicious transactions. This was about him, the man who had supposedly destroyed her, the man she'd claimed to despise, and she was letting him drive her car, using her car.
Where was she going when she said she was working late? Where were those late-night phone calls really going? I went home that night, and I just watched her. She was humming, making dinner, acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. I tried to talk to her casually. "Hey, saw you got a parking ticket. Everything okay?" She just waved her hand. "Oh, that must have been when I was helping Jenny move that filing cabinet. So annoying." Jenny was her sister. He had a sister named Jenny. That was a lie. A blatant, obvious lie. The next morning, I was up before her. I grabbed her phone while she was in the shower. I know. I've never done anything like that. The guilt was immediate, suffocating. But the need to know. It was a desperate, primal urge. I scrolled through her contacts. No Mark. Of course not. Then I looked at her messages. So many deleted conversations. But I found one. An old thread from a few months back, with a contact saved as accountant. The messages were short, cryptic. Payment received. Funds cleared. Please confirm latest transfer. And then, one that stopped my heart. Can you transfer another $5,000 for Mark's rent this month? He's behind again. $5,000 for his rent this month. Not a one-off, not a loan, and it wasn't from a joint account. It was from her personal account, the one with the insane balance. This wasn't a friendly favor. This was systematic. This was a lifestyle. Her ex-husband's entire lifestyle, funded anonymously. And by anonymously, I mean anonymously from me, from us. I looked at her phone, the screen illuminating my own hollowed-out face. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, was systematically funneling our business's success, or at least her share of it, into the hands of the man who was supposed to be her past, her tormentor. And she was doing it in secret, behind my back, while I was working myself to the bone, pouring every ounce of energy into our dream. The anger was a tidal wave, but it was drowned out by a chilling, icy despair. It wasn't just the money. It was the lies, the calculated deception, the sheer audacity of it. She was playing me, playing us, playing our entire future. I put her phone back on the nightstand, my hands shaking. I walked out of the bedroom,
the silence of the house amplifying the pounding in my chest. I went downstairs, made a pot of coffee, the smell acrid in my nostrils. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the chipped formica, trying to piece together the last few months, the last few years. Every little oddity, every unanswered question, suddenly snapped into sharp, horrifying focus. The mud, the late nights, the expensive sweaters, the hushed phone calls. It was all connected, a perfectly constructed web of deceit, and I was caught in the middle of it, blindfolded and deaf. I heard her moving upstairs, the shower turning off. Soon she'd come down, give me that bright fake smile, ask about my day, and I'd have to pretend. I'd have to play along, because I didn't know what else to do. The truth, the full, devastating truth, was still unraveling, a tangled ball of yarn I didn't know how to begin to sort. But one thing was terrifyingly clear. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was a stranger, and she was destroying us, piece by agonizing piece. All while smiling and telling me everything was going to be okay. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like ash. I felt like I was drowning, and she was the one holding my head underwater. The coffee, bitter and black, did nothing to cut through the thick fog of disbelief that had settled over me. Sarah came downstairs, her usual morning energy a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. She looked good, too good. Her hair was soft and styled, her eyes bright, a faint blush on her cheeks. She was wearing a silk robe, the kind I'd only ever seen her wear on special occasions, and even then, sparingly. She poured herself a mug, humming that same tuneless melody from last night. "Morning," she said, her voice light, breezy. She didn't look at me, not really. Her gaze flickered, landing on the window, the newspaper on the counter, anywhere but my face. It was a practiced avoidance, a skill she'd honed, I now realized, over a long, insidious period. I didn't reply. I just watched her, the stranger in my kitchen. I tried to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the one I was seeing now, the architect of this elaborate, devastating betrayal. Every movement, every innocent gesture, was now tainted, imbued with a hidden, rotten meaning. The way she stirred her coffee, the slight tilt of her head as she listened to the birds outside, the way she tugged a stray strand of hair behind her ear. It was all a performance, a masterclass in deception. "You're quiet this morning," she finally observed, her tone laced with a carefully manufactured concern. "Still tired from that inventory rush?" I forced a nod. Something like that. My voice sounded rough, like it belonged to someone else. I cleared my throat. "Just thinking about the business." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes finally meeting mine for a fleeting moment. There was a hardness there I'd never noticed before, a glint of something calculating. "We're doing so well. It's incredible, isn't it? All our hard work paying off." Her words, meant to be reassuring, landed like daggers. Our hard work, our success, the very thing she was siphoning away, the very foundation she was undermining. She used them as proof of our shared prosperity. The hypocrisy was so profound, so breathtaking. I almost laughed. A hollow, broken sound. "Yeah, I managed." My gaze dropped back to my mug. "Incredible." She moved around the kitchen, her movements fluid and confident. She picked up a stray crumb from the counter, wiped down a minuscule spill. Every gesture spoke of a normalcy that felt grotesque. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her, shake her, demand an explanation for the wreckage she'd made of my life. But I couldn't. Not yet. I was still too raw, too shocked. The full scope of it, the why, was still eluding me. Why him? Why all the lies? Why this elaborate charade? I spent the rest of the morning in a daze. At the warehouse, the familiar hum of machinery, the scent of old leather and polished wood, usually so comforting, now felt alien. Every interaction with the staff was a struggle. I'd catch myself scrutinizing them, wondering if they knew, if Sarah had confided in anyone, if this was some sick game played out with me as the unwitting fool. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance, this paranoia that had taken root in the fertile soil of her betrayal. Sarah was supposed to join me at the warehouse after lunch. She'd claimed she had early morning client meeting. Another lie, I now knew. A flimsy excuse to be wherever she needed to be to facilitate her secret life. When she arrived, she was all smiles and efficiency, her usual confident demeanor. She greeted everyone warmly, asked about their work, her voice effortlessly projecting a picture of a dedicated, involved business owner. "Everything all right?" she asked me, leaning into my personal space with a brush of her hand on my arm. The touch sent a shiver of revulsion through me. You seem a little distant. I pulled away slightly, feigning preoccupation. Just the usual end-of-day crunch. We've got that big online sale coming up.
Right. She nodded, her eyes darting around the bustling space. We need to make sure we're fully stocked and promoted. Every dollar counts, after all. Every dollar counts. The irony was so thick, it was suffocating. Later that evening, after the warehouse had emptied and the day's work was done, Sarah suggested we go out for dinner. To celebrate our amazing success, she'd said, her smile radiant. I'd agreed, my mind racing. This was my chance. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't keep living this lie. We went to that Italian place downtown, the one with the dim lighting and the red checkered tablecloths, the kind of place where couples whisper sweet nothings over wine. It felt like a scene from a movie, a sick, twisted comedy of errors. Sarah ordered her usual, a glass of Cabernet and the seafood linguine. I ordered a whiskey, neat. She talked about the business, about potential new suppliers, about her dreams for expanding into physical retail. She spoke with such passion, such conviction, it was easy to forget, for a fleeting moment, the truth that lay beneath. She was a master manipulator, and in that moment, sitting across from her, I felt the full force of her skill. You know, she said, swirling her wine, sometimes I can't believe how far we've come. Remember those tiny apartment days, crammed with boxes, barely enough room to breathe? And now, this? We're actually doing it. I watched her, the candlelight playing on her features, making her look impossibly beautiful and impossibly distant. Sarah, I began, my voice low, deliberate. I'd rehearsed this 100 times in my head, but the words still felt clumsy, inadequate. We need to talk. About things. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. The slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible stiffening of her shoulders. She knew I knew, or at least, she suspected. What kind of things? She asked, her tone now carefully neutral, guarded. Things like where the money is going, Sarah. The air in the restaurant seemed to thicken. A nearby couple's laughter sounded jarringly loud. Sarah's hand, which had been resting on the table, now clenched into a fist. I don't understand, she said, her voice a little too sharp. Don't you? I met her gaze, my own hardening. The despair was still there, a cold ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a burning anger. I saw the bank statement, Sarah, your personal account, the one with the substantial balance. Her face drained of color. The carefully constructed mask of innocence shattered, revealing the panic beneath. Her eyes flickered, searching for an escape route, a way to spin this, to lie her way out of it. That's an old account, she stammered, her voice trembling. For investments I made before we even met. No, Sarah, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The transactions are recent, very recent, and one of them, it mentioned rent, for Mark. The name hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. Her ex-husband, the ghost that had always lurked in the shadows of our relationship, the phantom of her past pain, the man I had been told she despised, the man who had supposedly left her broken. Her breath hitched. She looked away, her gaze fixed on the breadbasket as if it held the answers to the universe. You went through my things? She whispered, her voice laced with accusation. I had to, Sarah, I said, my own voice cracking with the strain. Because you lied to me. You lied about everything. About late nights, about client meetings, about where your car was. You lied about Mark. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a path down her cheek. It was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in weeks, but it felt like a performance, a calculated display of distress. It's not what you think, she choked out. Then what is it, Sarah? I leaned forward, my voice raw with desperation. What is it? Why are you secretly giving him money? Why are you funding his lifestyle? Our money, Sarah. Our business's success. You're taking our future and giving it to him. She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else. Defiance. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Pressure? I scoffed. What pressure? The pressure of building a life with me, the pressure of our shared dream, or the pressure of keeping your dirty little secret hidden. He needed help, she whispered, her gaze dropping again. He was in trouble. Trouble? So you help him with our money,
While I'm working myself to death, pouring every ounce of myself into our business, you're secretly bailing out the man who supposedly broke your heart. The anger was a wildfire now, consuming everything in its path. You told me he was a deadbeat, a cheat, someone you'd washed your hands of. Her shoulders slumped. The fight seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a heavy resignation. That's part of the story, yes, but it's not the whole story. What's the rest of the story, Sarah? I demanded, my voice rising. Heads in nearby tables began to turn. I didn't dare. Tell me, Sarah. Tell me the truth. Why are you still tied to him? Why are you still giving him everything while I'm here, believing in us? She took a shaky breath. Mark, he's not just some musician who messed up. He's in deep. He owes people. Dangerous people. My mind reeled. Dangerous people. This was escalating beyond anything I could have imagined. And you're paying them off. She nodded. A single, devastating movement. He called me, desperate. Said they were going to hurt him. He said he had no one else to turn to. And you just believed him. The disbelief was palpable. After everything he did to you, you're risking everything, our everything for him. It's complicated, she whispered, tears streaming freely now. He said he'd tell people things. Things about me. About our past. What things? I pressed, my heart hammering against my ribs. What could he possibly have on you that's worth this much money, this much deception? She looked away again, her gaze unfocused, lost in some distant, terrible memory. He knows about the beginning, about how we really met, about how things were with him when I first met you. He knows I wasn't completely over him. He knows I lied to you from the very start. The words hit me like a physical blow. Lied to you from the very start. The foundation of our entire relationship, the bedrock of my trust, crumbled into dust. The woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who claimed to have been a victim of his betrayal, had in fact been keeping him in her life, using him, and then using me. The entire narrative of her past, her pain, her recovery, was a lie. She hadn't escaped Mark. She had been managing him, subtly, covertly, all along. And now, he was leveraging that lie, threatening to expose her, and by extension, expose me to the devastating truth of her deception. You lied about everything, I repeated, the words barely audible. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, crushing sadness. She shook her head, a silent sob racking her body. He knows I never truly left him, that I kept in contact, that there were times. Her voice trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of her betrayal. Times what, Sarah?
I demanded, the last vestiges of my composure dissolving. Times you were with him while you were with me? She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and landing on the tablecloth. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I waited, my entire world hanging in the balance, for her to deny it, to scream that it wasn't true, to salvage some shred of the woman I thought I loved. But she didn't. She just sat there, her face a mask of despair, her silence a deafening confirmation. She had been lying to me from the very beginning, a masterfully woven tapestry of deceit. And Mark, her ex, the supposed villain of her past, was the keeper of her true story, the one holding the strings that controlled her present. And he was using that knowledge and her lingering feelings to bleed our success dry. The realization was a cold, sharp shard of ice piercing my heart. We weren't just building a business. We were funding her guilt, her history, her ongoing entanglement with the man she'd sworn she'd left behind. The implications were staggering. Every sacrifice, every late night, every dream we'd shared was tainted by her secret, her fear, and her desperate attempts to keep it buried. And now here I was, sitting across from her, the shattered pieces of my reality scattered around me, wondering what was left to salvage, what was real, and who this woman truly was. The waiter approached our table, a polite smile on his face, asking if everything was all right. I could only stare at Sarah, my vision blurred, the sound of my own ragged breathing filling the void. The waiter, a young guy with tired eyes and a forced smile, hovered, notepad in hand. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the din of satisfied diners. Sarah flinched,
as if jolted from a trance, and managed a watery smile. "Yes," she choked out, her voice a thin thread. "Everything is fine." She fumbled for her purse, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlatch it. She pulled out her wallet, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. Could we just get the check, please?" she asked, her eyes still fixed on me, a plea in their depths that I couldn't, or wouldn't, answer. I just sat there, numb. The anger, the shock, the utter devastation. It was a chaotic symphony playing out in my head, drowning out all external sound. I watched her fumble with her credit card, her nails, usually immaculate, chipped and uneven. She avoided my gaze, her face a roadmap of shame and fear. But there was something else there too, a flicker of something that looked a lot like regret. But it was too late for regret. It was like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube, except the tube was our life, and the toothpaste was a toxic cocktail of lies and betrayal. We left the restaurant in silence. The cool night air did nothing to clear my head. The city lights blurred into a smear of meaningless color. I drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind a battlefield. Every memory, every shared laugh, every whispered promise was now suspect, tainted by the possibility that it had all been a carefully crafted illusion. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built a life with, was a stranger who had been playing me for a fool, systematically feeding me a narrative that suited her own hidden agenda. When we pulled into the driveway of our house, the same house we'd poured our hearts and souls into renovating, the same house that was supposed to be our sanctuary, it felt like a tomb. The lights were on, casting a warm, inviting glow that felt like a mockery. We walked inside, the silence between us a palpable entity, heavy and suffocating. Sarah went straight to the master bedroom, her footsteps leaden. I stood in the living room, staring at the family photos on the mantelpiece, us smiling, happy. A lie, a carefully constructed lie for posterity. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, my hands still shaking. I sat at the table, the same table where we'd planned our future, where we toasted our successes, and I just stared at the grain of the wood. Hours passed, I don't know how many. The moon rose, casting long shadows across the floor. Finally, I heard Sarah's bedroom door creak open. She appeared in the doorway, dressed in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, her hair messy, her face pale. She looked fragile, broken. But was it real, or was it just another act? Can we talk?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. I turned to look at her, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes that wasn't calculated. It was raw, unadulterated pain. But even then, a part of me was still skeptical, guarded. "What more is there to say, Sarah?" My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "You've told me everything, haven't you? Or is there another chapter I'm not privy to?" She flinched in my tone. "Don't," she pleaded. "Please. I know I've messed up, royally. But I'm scared." "Scared?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You should have been scared when you were lying to me. You should have been scared when you were emptying our accounts. You should have been scared when you were sneaking around with your ex-husband." "It wasn't like that," she whispered, tears welling up again. "Not entirely." "Not entirely?" My voice rose, a tremor of anger finally breaking through the numbness. "So what was it then, Sarah? Enlighten me. Enlighten me on how you were secretly funneling money to the man who supposedly ruined your life while I was busting my ass building ours." She walked slowly into the kitchen, her gaze fixed on the floor. She sat down at the table, across from me, and her shoulders slumped. He threatened me. He said he'd expose things from the beginning. Things about us, about how I wasn't completely over him when I met you, how I kept in touch, how there were times. She couldn't say the words. She didn't have to. The shame etched on her face told the whole story. "Times," I pushed, my voice a low growl. "Times when? While you were with me, while you were telling me you loved me." She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "He had proof, Mark. He had emails, texts. He said he'd tell you everything, ruin everything for us. And I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. He said he needed money. He said he was in trouble with some people, dangerous people. He said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure you knew." I stared at her, trying to process the torrent of information. It was a twisted, desperate kind of blackmail. He knew her secret, her lingering feelings for him, his indiscretions during the early days of our relationship, and he was leveraging it to drain us dry. And she, in her fear, had chosen to protect her carefully constructed facade, her seemingly perfect life, by feeding the very beast that threatened to devour it. So you chose to protect the lie, I said, my voice hollow. You chose to protect this life, this image, over telling me the truth, over trusting me. I was afraid, she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I was so afraid of losing you, of losing everything we'd built. I thought I could handle it, that I could pay him off, and he'd go away. But he didn't go away, did he? I said, the bitterness seeping into every word. He just kept coming back, demanding more, and you kept giving it to him. Our hard-earned money, our future.
I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I walked over to the window, looking out at the dark, silent street. Do you have any idea what this has done to me, Sarah? To us? She didn't answer, her sobs the only sound in the room. I turned back to face her, and the sight of her, utterly broken, was almost unbearable. But the pain in my chest was too deep, too raw, to allow for easy forgiveness. He knew, Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He knew the one thing that would break me, the one thing that would shatter the foundation of everything I believed in, and you let him. You gave him the ammunition. You actively participated in your own destruction and mine along with it. I know, she whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. I know. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Sarah, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Sorry doesn't erase the lies. It doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't bring back the trust you've so carelessly thrown away. I walked out of the kitchen, not sure where I was going, just needing to escape the suffocating weight of her confession. I went into my office, the one room in the house that had always been my sanctuary, my space. I sat at my desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminating the silence. I opened up the financial spreadsheets, the numbers staring back at me, cold and unforgiving. Every figure represented hours of my life, sweat, sacrifice, and now a testament to her deception. I looked at the personal account details again, the rent payments to Mark, the exorbitant amounts. It wasn't just about keeping him quiet. It was about enabling him, about funding his life while ours was being systematically dismantled. The thought made me sick. I had been so proud of our success, so confident in our future, and all along, a part of me was being siphoned away to fuel the past she'd tried so hard to bury. I spent the rest of the night there, staring at the screen, replaying every conversation, every look, every gesture, searching for clues I had missed, for signs that I had been too blind, too trusting to see. The sheer scale of the deception was overwhelming. It wasn't just a momentary lapse, it was a calculated, prolonged charade. And the motivation? Fear. Fear of exposing her own vulnerabilities, her own past mistakes, to the man she claimed to love. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky a pale gray, I finally looked up. Sarah was standing in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed, her face etched with exhaustion and despair. She held a mug of coffee in her trembling hands. I made you some coffee, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't take it. I just looked at her, a profound sadness settling over me. The anger had subsided, replaced by a deep, aching weariness. Sarah, I said, my voice calm, measured. What we had, it was built on a lie, and I can't live with that. I can't build a future on a foundation that's already rotten. Her breath hitched. What are you saying? I'm saying I can't do this anymore, I said, my gaze unwavering. I can't pretend that this is something that can be fixed. The trust is gone, Sarah, and without trust, there's nothing. Tears streamed down her face, silent and relentless. Please, she whispered, don't do this. We can work through this. We can... How? I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. How do we work through this? You lied about everything, Sarah. About him, about your past, about your feelings. How can I ever believe anything you say again? She shook her head, a desperate plea in her eyes. I'll do anything to earn your trust back. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I had loved, but a stranger, a prisoner of her own fear and deception. There are some things, Sarah, that can't be earned back. Some wounds that are too deep. Some betrayals that are too profound. I stood up, walking past her, the scent of her perfume, once so intoxicating, now a reminder of the illusion it represented. I walked out of the office, out of the house, and into the quiet morning. The air was crisp, clean. The world was waking up, oblivious to the wreckage of my life. I didn't know where I was going, or what I was going to do. All I knew was that the future I had envisioned, the one I had worked so tirelessly to build, had just been reduced to ashes. And standing there, under the vast, indifferent sky, I felt an emptiness so profound, it was as if a part of my soul had been irrevocably erased. The silence was deafening, and in that silence, I could finally hear the echoes of my own broken heart. This was the end. Not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet implosion, leaving nothing but dust and the lingering scent of betrayal.